Welcome back to Civilnet. I'm your host, Patrick Elliott, and I'm actually delighted to be joined by an old, longtime friend, also fellow Montreal repat Armenian, Mr. Raffi Niziblian. He's a business owner. He's the founder of DEEM Communications. Been living here for quite a while, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. You make it sound that I'm old. You said old friend quite a while.
I've known you for a long time.
Yes,
I've known you for a long time.
We are old friends. Both of us are from Montreal.
Yeah.
Have lots of cultural sort of baggage that we bring with us. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for hopping on. I think one of the things that would make this interesting is that we disagree on practically everything, and that's why I wanted to have you on here. What unites us is our love for this country. Our approach is very.
Disagree with what you said. See,
we're off to a good start.
Yeah. I think we agree on the pleasures of fatherhood.
Yeah.
I've seen you excel and shine in that role, and I think I have done okay too. So in that aspect, we see both Armenia and fatherhood. So there you go. See, two things.
Well, we're united by common values, which honestly, this is kind of a good segue into what we wanted to discuss today, right? Is that personally, I think Armenia is going through a new phase, and for lack of a better term, let's call it a revolution. And I think that in my opinion, we need to do away with the old and bring in the new. I think that we're going through some very deep existential questions of what it means to be Armenian, what vision we have for this country, what it is that we're trying to build, what we're trying to create. And part of the reason I wanted you on this podcast is because one of the most common things that we're seeing online is Armenians, we need to be united. We're so divided. We need to be united. But no one ever qualifies what that actually means. And generally speaking, when I've dug beneath the surface, again, this is a sweeping generalization, but what I've realized is that what most Armenians are saying is, you have to agree with me. You have to agree with me. We need to be united really means like, forget your opinions, you have to agree with what my vision is. And I've never found any of these visions particularly compelling. I find that one of the big faults with the Armenian community, both abroad and here, is that we're always looking backwards. We're never looking forward. Instead of being dynamic and going, okay, what do we adopt? What do we change? What can we transcend? Instead, we have posters everywhere that says Gartan Nejde, which is fine. Read your history.
Right.
But let's just say that this 100-year-old philosophy didn't account for Starlink, AI. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a place here. So anyway, what's your opinion on this?
I think you have a good assessment of what's going on in Armenia, but I would like to position it in a global context as well, because this is what's happening globally. Shift of power, and we can sense even mindsets and how polarized ideologies have become in the States, in Europe. You can see, right wing, left wing, sort of struggling to hold on to more power and more division rather than understanding what unity is. Yes, I see what you're saying about Armenians talking about unity, and a lot of the times we don't even unite around a common theme as simple or as ideologically important as Armenia. When we talk about Armenia, you would think that all Armenians would prioritize Armenia. And unfortunately, in the diaspora, I've realized that Armenia is not always a priority. Armenianness for the individual Armenian is, but Armenia doesn't define their Armenianness, and it doesn't culminate to the highest priority. So that in itself creates a division when there is not one common vision towards which we all strive to work. So that definitely brings about the discourse of we agree to disagree or disagree to disagree. We wanna have people to agree with us, otherwise we just shut them out, or even segregate and even isolate that individual thought that is different than mine, or a collective thought in a lot of the cases. That's something that is quite common, and I've seen that when I was in the diaspora over 20 years ago. I remember for the I think, the 85th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, and we wanted to have.
You're that old, huh?
Yeah. There it is again.
Yeah.
85th. So we as youth of different community groups in Armenia tried to do collectively activities, and we saw the older generation that hindered and put sticks in our wheels and tried to make it difficult for us to have a united front, even for a cause that we all shared. You know, this ancestral baggage that we've carried throughout. Yeah. And I see that again today in Armenia, in the diaspora, within the same communities. And I think today it's even more so, more than ever.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up, actually. I share that entirely. I think that's one of the big problems, the big reasons why I'm not a big believer in this whole, like, we need to unite behind X thing, especially since it's our institutions who are calling for such unison, when in reality I won't name them, but all of them, our institutions are not fit for purpose. They're rotten to the core. They no longer have a vision or a purpose. They're not leading in a certain direction. They're just these self-perpetuating organizations that require donations and funds, but they're not creating any kind of tangible, look, yes, there's a preservation of the Armenian language, although even statistically in the diaspora, that's starting to die out by the third generation. So this idea that one or many institutions are cornerstones of what it means to be Armenian, I disagree with entirely. And as a student of history, listen, our pre-Christian heritage is as rich as our Christian heritage. So already that's out the window to say that, oh, our uniqueness comes from, well, that institution, right? Whether that's the church or something. Right. I know some totally atheistic Armenians who are absolute total believers and who are fighting for the cause and who are doing more for this country than super believers who have never set foot in Armenia. That's right. And that's not to disparage those people as well. I'm sure they do. They're fantastic people and they do a lot of great things. But what I'm saying is that to then take one simple pillar or one institution and go, that's what it means to be Armenian.
Right.
I think that's changing so fast that it doesn't make sense anymore. We need to find something to replace that.
You know, so a lot of what you said makes sense. There's a belief that if you speak the language, if you go to church, if you are, you know, a Christian, if you dance the dance and eat the food, that's what makes you Armenian. Yeah. And in reality, I think identity today in a global context is very, very different. You can be of mixed marriage. You can be someone who doesn't even know the language and have discovered your culture and come back with birthright and you know, and do so much for the country as opposed to the other who speaks the language.
Or someone with no drop of Armenian blood, but speaks the language, lives here, invests, you know, is here because they love here and choose to be here.
I think that's very, very good point, because, I mean, we're a country where with citizens, and citizens don't all have to be ethnically Armenian. And that's a very important thing for us to talk about, especially with today's immigration with the Russians. I think recently I read something about Indians moving to Armenia.
Substantial amount of them. Yeah. Who, by the way, like gathered supplies and free meals and put together stuff during the war. You know, they cried with us. Assyrians who there's 1 million of them left on the planet, right? We say we're a beleaguered small country. We have, 12 million Armenians. There's 1 million of these guys left, and they sent their young sons to die. Are they not as Armenian as I am? Are they not entitled to this homeland?
I think definitely these people are considered Armenian, more Armenian because they live here, and you know, I want to be pragmatic also. Yeah. They pay their taxes.
Yep, they're skin in the game here.
This is what makes them more Armenian than the ethnic Armenian living, third generation living in the States or Moscow or whatever. But I think one of the things that we should be talking about is how to change that. You said something about forgetting the past and looking forward to the future. I don't want us to forget completely the past. I think we need to have lessons learned and learn what we've done well, what we haven't done well. There's a good amount of things that we've done well in terms of, building communities, sustaining ourselves in the diaspora. We have done that well. Yeah. Individually, Armenians are quite successful. If you see, in the diaspora, in Armenia, we can name a lot of individuals. Collectively is where we're having an issue. I guess, who was it that said, William Sarian, when two Armenians meet, they create three political parties, or the three parties anyway. Three ideologies evolve.
Well, the desert island joke?
No, tell me.
If an Armenian is stranded on a desert island, he's going to build 2 churches. Why? Well, that's the one I go to. Well, that's the one. I never go to that one.
Yeah, kind of makes sense. I mean, we're such a small country with 2 Catholicoses, 2 heads of churches. I mean, really, do we really need that much resources spent on one institution? Anyhow, so which brings me to, okay, what's next? What should we be doing better? One of the things, I mean, I'm a communicator, and my background is communications. So I do strategic communications. I forge narratives. I try to promote a storyline, and that's very important. So what is our story? How are we telling it, or are we telling it? And that that came to fruition when we realized in the 2020 war, when we were yelling, free Artsakh and Artsakh liberation and stop the war in Artsakh. And a lot of people were writing to me saying, what's an Artsakh? And this is not to say that the name changed in 2016 formally. Even Nagorno-Karabakh, for a lot of people, was not clear. We didn't really do a good job in creating forums, seminars, publications, making film, documentary, or narrative. Where is the masses? Where are the masses? They're on Netflix. They're watching movies on the Amazon Prime. They're in the blockbuster cinemas. Where are the Armenians in all of this sphere? We haven't really been good in promoting ourselves. Recently, I was in Cyprus, Larnaca. There's a biennale festival, art festival, contemporary art, and it was just beautiful. Like the whole town had exhibitions and so on. And I noticed that the Armenian government, the Ministry of Culture, was a big financer of that biennale. So I just Googled and see, how come? What's this happening? Many Armenian artists were involved. Not one media article about this. The only inkling of a sign that this happened was on the website of the Ministry of Culture on a relatively, back-end page somewhere. So we didn't tell that story well. We didn't use that opportunity to say, hey, Armenia's cultural. Armenia has something to say in that sphere. Same thing happened when I went to Rwanda. I visited the Kigali Genocide Museum. It's their 30th anniversary next year, commemorating the atrocious acts of genocide. So I visited the site, and there's this audio tour you take, and hundreds of people lined up to get into the museum every day. And the audio was talking about all the different genocides that happened around the world, and it was talking about the Armenian genocide as well. And it was a good 3.5 minutes, which is good enough for an audio tour. I just couldn't find the artifacts. The wall was empty. The wall was completely empty, and I was asking what happened. And apparently there was damage. And I said, okay, when did that damage happen, and how can we fix it? And they said 2 years ago. And I said, it's taking you 2 years to reprint a PVC board and bring in
This is from our side or the Rwandan side?
No, the Rwandan side. And then, I dug deeper and deeper, and then I realized the Turkish lobby is doing everything they can to prevent those boards to go back up. And politically, there's a backlash, but the museum itself is resisting. They're keeping that wall purposely empty. They're not putting in something else instead, because as soon as they do, we sort of erase the genocide from that. And we haven't done anything. We haven't reached out. We haven't lobbied. We haven't written to them. So I'm like the second, maybe the third person to have written and said, where's the Armenian artifact? So we need to constantly be on the alert and try to tell our stories in the right places, put our resources, and it doesn't take much money to do that. There's not even one book in their bookstore of the Armenian genocide. And we have lots of stories, we have lots of narratives, we have lots of analytical research done around this. Why aren't we present there? And I think that's where I would like us to go, is telling our story better, being smart about it, creating that narrative that will appeal to the larger audiences, and trying to make that story part of the global story and not just like naregatsi or, as you put it, older generation thinkers. We have a lot of contemporary artists and contemporary thinkers that can contribute to the world. Pixart is a great example.
I'm going to respectfully disagree on a lot of that now. Now we're going to put the disagreement grenade in there. Not to go too deep into my own personal beliefs, but you kind of sugarcoated it in the very beginning that we're not good enough at telling our story. I'll tell you, we failed. We failed at everything. We failed institutionally. We failed the narrative. We failed on the activist front. And I think that's part and parcel of us just constantly looking backwards and not looking forward. And that ended up costing us Artsakh. We lived through the Second Armenian Genocide, something none of us thought would live through. We lived through a 9-month siege, medieval style, by an absolutely fascist regime. And the world did nothing, and we're still complaining. We're still the alarm bells haven't gone off. So, for me, how do we weaponize the genocide? This is not it's very not a sensitive thing to say, but this is what Israel did successfully. So they're failing now in their narrative because after a while you can't mask the atrocities they're committing in Gaza. But until this point, they were very successful. They didn't wait. They didn't rely on other people. They rely on themselves, and we need to do the same, honestly. So when it comes to, yes, do we have multiple achievements? Absolutely. But I would say we are now as a people, we have become overqualified but underaccomplished. Armenians worldwide are extremely educated. They're very successful individually, like you said, but underaccomplished when it comes to what this state has produced. And I've given this example often. Have you ever seen, you have your kids, I'm sure they've gone to hospitals here. You've seen Robin the Robot?
Yes.
When my son was doing his heart test, he had Robin the Robot and he was fascinated. I want somebody who bumps into me in, I don't know, Croatia or wherever and goes, "Oh, you're Armenian? Robin the Robot, that was, life-changing for my son."
But how do we do that? How do we do that?
There we go. So you mentioned the genocide, and this is a huge point of contention, but at the end of the day, considering that we're small and we have limited resources, we need to decide what we're going to prioritize. And since we're in a life or death situation, for me, it's very simple. Wealth creation, innovation, and it has to happen here, nowhere else. So if that comes at the expense of marching every April, I'm the descendant of a genocide survivor, so I don't say this lightly. But I think that we need to divorce the idea of Armenians equals genocide victims. Genocide survivors is very different. That's the point that I'm getting at here, is that we need to turn our narrative from victim to victor. And I'll give another very good example.
But I don't disagree with that. I don't see where the disagreement is yet. I don't see where we are disagreeing.
Well, so where does it come to? What does it come to in terms of tangibles? It's an individual effort. In other words, I think that every single person needs to decide what life they want to build and craft and create for themselves.
But isn't that what we're doing now? I mean, this is exactly what's happening, and that's our failure, is because one person like Serge Tankian tries to do his own advocacy about what's happening in Artsakh, and there's little community gathered around him.
Because there's no skin in the game. There's no skin in the game.
I disagree. He's married to Armenian.
Not him. I'm saying why is there no community rally? Because for years our definition of what a successful Armenian looks like is April 24th you carry a flag, April 25th you go back to your life. You go and you put some comments during the 2020 Artsakh war, but then you unplug, you order your Uber Eats, and you're chilling in California with your friends.
All right.
There is no skin in the game.
But let's take a step back for my mass audiences. Right, so we have a Julia Roberts who is starring in a film that takes her. She's a culinary, expert. Goes to the Caucasus and finds herself in a winery in Armenia. Falls in love with the winemaker, and we discover Armenia through that film. And then at that time, people in school saying, "Hey, I saw the Julia Roberts film. Armenia was so beautiful, man."
There you go.
Yeah, so that's the
Well,
narrative.
Anthony Bourdain, right? He did that.
Well,
He came here,
Anthony also is a very niche market, although he's a very major influencer in. I'm talking about the masses.
Yeah.
The kids in the high school, the university students, the pop music listener. Talking about seeing our country, let alone just hearing the name, seeing it in a different context. You can include the story of genocide in Julia Roberts' film, like the Holocaust has been done in so many great instances in film, where we as the masses learned, in bite-sized information about the Holocaust, how things happened, what was the trauma that these people have lived, how did they alleviate their trauma, what did they do as a society to overcome it, how did they one help the other, how did other countries contribute, and so on. We haven't been telling that story is what my initial statement is. Recently I'm on a board of Hakawati NGO, and this is in Arabic, it's a storyteller. So we're in the coming years, I'm hoping to be more involved hands-on in the healing process of storytelling, using puppets, using films, using storytelling, and maybe writings. And the more we tell the story, the more creatively we tell the story, the more we will have support when the time is needed, the more we will have tourists visiting our country, the more people will buy our products. Because when you say it's made in Armenia, it should have a value that should say, oh, great, then this is great organic produce coming from there. That's the sort of narrative we want to hear when you say
excellence and achievement.
Exactly. Yeah. So you want to qualify it with some value. And how do we do that? Not just by making good products, but by telling about the good products in a wider context, much wider than what we've been doing.
Yeah, I like that. The main thing that I find is missing is that there's the why behind it. So whenever, for those of you who don't know, I'm a commentator here, not a journalist. So I work in the private sector. And when I'm doing advertising for companies, they'll come to me and they'll go, here's what we're doing. Here's our brand. And I always stop and I go, why? Why do you want a blog? Why do you want a YouTube channel? Why do you have this whole lengthy process? Why don't we just simplify and get people from point A to point B? And I look at Armenia kind of through that same lens. So why are we commemorating the genocide? Every single year, why do we do it? Why is it so important? It's to prevent it from happening again, to ensure that but we failed at that. It happened again, and the prevention didn't work. But if something doesn't work, again, just like in advertising, you're launching some ads, okay, it didn't work, it didn't convert, no problem. Back to the drawing board. Let's reinvent it and let's start again without any loss of enthusiasm, because there's so much at stake here. And I love this place. It's a beautiful place. It's an exciting place, and these centers of excellence are truly starting to spring up. And I want to nurture that. And I'll give a specific tangible example. Ever see the movie Munich? I don't think so. It's a very interesting movie. It's based on historical facts, right? But it's about the Mossad agents who were tracking down the perpetrators of the Munich Olympic Games massacre. No, I haven't seen it. Okay. Regardless of your politics, it's an interesting movie. But my point is, there's no movie about Operation Nemesis. And again, throughout that movie, you're reminded that the Holocaust means never again. We're enforcing that never again. Again, we had Kirk Krikorian sitting in Hollywood, right? Yeah, let me just disagree with that. I mean, making a film about a very controversial and very politicized topic will not get us there. Making a film about what Armenia today represents and what it is today, and how it could be contextualized in a global context, is where the appeal will be. And this is where we underlie the information about what happened in Artsakh, what happened 100 years ago, what are diasporans. You always can include the underlying storyline within a more popular context.
And that's going to be the best way to tell the story. Because if we make a film about the genocide, about Nemesis, about the first people that are going to watch it, the people that are concerned, are interested, and the history buffs like you that will want to watch this, and it will not become a popular film.
Munich was awarded all kinds of stuff.
But
I'm talking mass market still.
Yeah, but we're talking about a historic fact that has been, since the Second World War, has been mediatized to the death. So anything about the Holocaust or Israel or the Second World War would be watched because there's a lot of context given to us already. What we don't know is when you say Project Nemesis and you see a world that you know nothing about, it becomes an epoch film. So you need to know about the First World War, the Ottoman Empire, the Young Turks. You need to have had some context to appreciate that film. Whereas Julia Roberts going to a winery is an appeal for a lot of people. Yeah. And in that sense, she learns about the history of Armenia, and the historian that got drunk last night, and together they discovered the story of Armenia and so on. So really bringing it back to storytelling, bringing it back to positioning our narrative, what we are, who we are today. And I think the why is the most important question of all. And that's where strategic communication comes into play. So I work a lot with government agencies, international donor organizations, and so on. And a lot of the times that's the first question I ask. Why do we need this campaign? Why do you think this is more important? The judicial reform, is it more important than the education reform that's happening? And if so how do we contextualize it? And why does the public need to know about this reform? What does it give to them? So these are the questions we ask every time that we are formulating that storyline and the actions that will follow. Because if we just think about tactically, let's make a movie, that's a tactic. Yeah. And in itself is not a solution. You need to have the why. Why did we make that film where Julia Roberts is visiting Armenia? Why is that important now? Yeah.
I don't want to get too into movie making. I want to go back to the broader question.
Movie
right?
making is just an example.
Yeah,
like the same can happen with exhibitions, photo
tourism, right?
Tourism.
The fact that people are coming here,
right?
Visiting.
There's a lot of expos that we can be present. There's a lot of places that we can make our stories known to a wider audience.
So back to the original question: what is the story that we're trying to create?
What is the story? That's an excellent question. And if you're asking me as an individual, I can give you my individual.
I'm a believer in individuals, not collective. So tell me.
But I think regardless if you believe in collectiveness or individuality, the story, the bigger story is the story that we all repeat. And that's what makes it stronger, because I can talk about winemaking and you can be talking about tech industry, and the other guy can be talking about agriculture, organic produce, and we will be cannibalizing the main important storyline. And if we try to figure out what is the story we want to talk about, what is Armenia good for? How can we make Armenia indispensable? Is the wine industry the one, or is it the tech, or is it the food, the agri-food, and the farming that we do with the clean produce? So once we understand what that is, we formulate it in a storyline, in a narrative that should come from the running government of that country now, and the government in itself should have a strategic communications direction. And I think the government currently is working on that. I know there's a lot of efforts being done around that. Once that storyline is done, then around that you can build a huge narrative with sub-stories. And it can be about tech, it can be about winemaking, it can be. So what is Armenia globally? I think right now, in the context of, and I think this could be a little bit controversial for a lot of people, it's a space where democracy is being practiced at its best, I think. There's a lot of issues. I don't doubt that, and I don't not see it. But this is where democracy happens. This is where everybody is allowed to say whatever they want. Freedom of speech is practiced more than it is in North America. Starting your business it's become so easy. Migration, traveling, speaking various languages, allowing people to just be what they can or want to be. I'm not talking about all the smaller minorities that are suffering certain consequences, but I think it's all part of the process. And I think if we played that card right, because we don't have oil, we don't have that natural resource that we can shine with economically, but we do have the human capital, the human, like you said, the individual that shines. And if we can build on that, then I think we can get a good narrative going. Disagree.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, I'm going to disagree, even just to disagree, right? Like, what if the government sets a plan and I don't agree? But I live here. I'm a taxpayer here. I consider myself an Armenian. What if I disagree? Am I all of a sudden out?
No. That's part of the democracy, and that's where we shine. That's where we should shine. If the government comes with I want to say government, but it's not about the government. It's a nation, the nation building process.
But that's a collective of individuals.
Right.
Which means it's at the individual level to be Armenia's brand ambassador.
Right.
Every person has to decide who they want to be, what they want to build, what they want to create. I think that's far more, when it comes from an organic place, it's far more sustainable than if it's some top-down.
That's why I said it's not necessarily government. It's a nation building, and that's where you have civil society, you have businesses, you have thought leaders that sort of create this. And it takes a process. It takes a while. It's not going to happen, in a year or two. It will take a while, but we need to talk about it. Yeah. We need to highlight it. We need to prioritize it in that aspect that, who we are, what we are, and how can we, even if we're not all of that, it's okay. We select a few components, and that's the story we're telling the world. Yeah. Because the rest of the story can be internal stories, internal identity. Not everybody needs to know that we are, individuals. I mean, we can each know that individually we excel, but the world needs to see a collective Armenia. They're not going to say, "Oh, let me go see what Raffi's doing." They want to go see what Armenia's up to.
Yeah, but if they meet 10 Raffis that are all committed to excellence, then you start to see the pattern. You go, okay,
that's right.
Armenians equal excellence. This makes more sense. But that's why it's on every individual to decide what they want to be and step. I'll give you a very.
I agree with that. I agree with that. They should decide on what they want to be. But the story, the narrative that's being told, like when we say what is Canada, there's a first reflex that comes into mind to the majority of the world. The same with what is France or what is the US, right? Yeah. So there's an image. There are like 5 words you can associate with that country that a majority would agree. Not everyone, but a majority would agree. What are those 5 words that connect to Armenians in the mindset of the non-Armenian, in the mindset of someone living in, I don't know, in Estonia? What is Armenian, or what is Armenia per se? I think that's where we want to strive to. That's what we want to strive to, and try and figure out, what do we want to be portrayed as? Hospitable? Okay, great. So we work on that. We train our teams, we train our staff, and that's the direction we go. Are we innovators? Then we invest a lot of money and help people, engineers and tech sector, to innovate and create. Are we a tourist destination? Then by all means, we create infrastructure, roads, travel packages. This is what I'm talking about, is, we prioritize something and we put all our efforts there. You want to be a tour operator, that's good. You want to be a photographer, that's great. You want to be an entrepreneur, a business, start your own business. But the bottom line will be, you're going to work for the same vision that leads in the top of mind of the visitor or of the reader of what Armenia is as a country of innovation. Okay, great. Then I know what Armenia is.
This conversation has been exactly what I wanted to showcase. Is that I like that we're not united, because then we get to have these discussions.
Sure.
We get to decide what we want to create. It creates room. I'm very, very worried if everybody agrees.
That's right.
It means it's stagnation. It's not growth. So thanks, Raffi, for hopping on today. This was
this was a pleasure.
Really a pleasure. What just as a final comment, going into New Year, what are you hopeful about for Armenia? What are you optimistic about? I
like that word, hopeful. So I'm becoming more and more a cheerleader of this hope-based communications. It's a term that was coined by Thomas Coombs, who talks about how do you as a collective or as an organization or as an individual see the future, and what are the steps and what are the activities and what are the messages that you're going to build to reach that point that you are hoping for. And I think that's the message I want to leave the audience today, the listeners, is what is the future we want, and how do we talk about that? How do we build our narratives around that? And I will be doing that through the Hakawati organization that I just talked about earlier, and hopefully I will be able to heal my traumas and hopefully heal the traumas of others who join me.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thanks for hopping on, Raffi.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Thanks again for watching. This has been Pat, and we'll see you in the new year.